Hello and welcome to the only podcast starting a band with our dad's sister on backup vocals called Coruscant. I'm Luke.
I'm Max.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Force for Thought.
A lot of moving parts to your jokes. You gotta stay alert when you're going through the setup.
If you're not watching on YouTube, you can see the wheels click in his head as he gets the joke about halfway through our intro.
As a non-Taylor, I like to think myself as an honorary Taylor. I'm waiting for your siblings now to disagree, and I'll pass. And then, as a non-Taylor, though, I'm like, is this something that's too inside for me that I don't know? But I got there.
Hello and welcome back. We just watched episode 7 of Skeleton Crew, titled "We're Going to Be in So Much Trouble." Right off the rip, Max, what'd you think of it?
I liked it a lot overall. There was a couple small weird things that we're probably going to get into. It probably wasn't my favorite episode, but it set up a lot of really good things that I'm very excited for moving forward. There's only one last episode, the finale. This was the penultimate episode. It ends on a cliffhanger, which was good, but disappointing now that I have to wait a week just to see how it plays out. But overall, I really liked it a lot. It was more kind of plot driven than character driven. At our last week's episode, I talked about how we kind of have one more character episode that we need to see for Jod and Wim each, and I didn't feel like we got that. We got some Jod, I feel like he definitely solidified himself as the bad guy. We were kind of wondering if he was gonna have a turning or a whatever
Redemption.
A redemption arc, I guess. Yeah, I don't. That's not.
I told you he wasn't. I felt proud of myself for that moment. I was like, he solidified last episode.
Yeah, he did. I think that's confirmed. He is a bad guy.
Matt, what'd you think of this episode?
This episode did a lot for me. I think more so than most other Star Wars shows, to be honest. I think this episode solidified for me the fact that this isn't a show that isn't just based on moments or great episodes, but a great story overall. And I think that this is, again, part of that great story. Again, I loved it. Now that all they have to do is stick the landing in the last episode. I feel like every single episode has been so good and has built upon the last. I wish just in general we got a bit more character development with the kids before they jumped into the adventure up front. But I mean, I'm still loving it. I really love the show. We get some great moments, some really jaw-dropping moments, surprises, and yeah. I mean, I think this is the most jaw-dropping moment episode, right? There's
my jaw was definitely dropped at a higher rate than previous episodes.
Right? Specifically at Neil's dad and how angry he
looked. I did not include that in my notes, but I do want to talk about it. Thank you for bringing that up. To round it out, I am glad I'm alone in my thoughts of not loving this episode all that much. It was definitely my least favorite of the 7 so far. And I feel like a lot of it's unfair that it's part 1 of a 2-part finale. I mean, if you think of it that way. A lot of my problems with it can be resolved in the finale, and they very well might be. But we'll get into it as we go through the episode, and first scene of the episode was one of my larger complaints of the episode, the parent chase scene when they're trying to send out that communication buoy and they're getting chased by the security droids. I don't know. I said it's giving young Leia getting chased by Flea in Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is a fine scene in theory, but the execution was not there for me in this one.
I wonder if it's something to do with how they're filming. I don't know if they're filming in the the volume or not. It doesn't look like it, but I mean, I just can't tell if there's something about the space they're filming in for Kenobi and this show. If it's we only have this amount of room to run, so you have to do it slower, or it's going to look too weird.
Scenes.
That's what I'm wondering, something like that. I know the background's changed and whatnot, but I'm just wondering, it's if you're using the volume, the circumference is only X amount. So I was wondering that this entire episode after you mentioned that. 'Cause it didn't
that
bother
would
me
make
as
sense.
much, but that's something that
I
I
would
was just thinking about.
I would think no, that this was filmed on a practical forest setting because one, that's easy enough to find, and two, a good enough amount of the show was filmed in that setting.
Yeah.
So it would
Yeah.
justify going on location somewhere. Max, did you like that sequence? Did you find it off-putting or something just lacking in it like I did?
So a couple of things. One, regarding the volume, it didn't really stick out to me in that scene that they were filming on the volume as much as it did in later scenes where it was very apparent. But that scene, you know, it was kind of lower stakes, like they were just kind of tasing them basically. So in the Leia episode of Kenobi, I think it kind of bothered me more because like she was in the middle of getting kidnapped. Like that was definitely a much more tense moment. Whereas this time they were just getting kind of yelled at by the police, so to speak. So
Yes.
it didn't really like bother me as much, but I do think there's definitely some things that they could have done to make that feel a little more tense. Like I feel like a lot of the reason it
Mhm.
kind of stuck out was because of how it was filmed and probably directed, where some of the shots were a little bit wider and they were kind of like on a steady cam and you just see them like kind of running in space and it just looks goofy. I feel like if they just did some different choices of like maybe some closer shots, maybe a little bit of shaky cam, like something to kind of like obscure some of the action that's going on because half of it isn't even visible. We don't see the droids during any of that. These
Mhm.
stuns come in from off screen basically out of nowhere. So I think there was probably a way to do it better, but overall it was a pretty low complaint that I have. It didn't bother me that much.
I didn't love it. It does lend credence to the utopian aspect of AT-ATN as opposed to dystopian, that unarmed black man can be disobeying and running from the police and it be a
Oh,
low
boy.
stakes situation. So that's nice,
That's true.
but
There's a
the
real.
rest of it, I don't know. It just didn't work for me. Especially, so this is in several parts because the parents kept showing up and Neil's dad
Hmm.
kept not showing up. Am I the only one
Yeah.
that doesn't that wants to see where Neil's dad is? Like,
He's an absent father. I don't know what to tell you. It's
he
unfortunate.
seems
He's,
to
he's
be
a working father. He's busy.
Yeah.
He's got a lot
he
of
could
kids.
be working. He could be taking care of the other kids, but
He's-
like, get a babysitter, man. Your son has been
Yeah.
kidnapped. You should be here for these moments.
Yeah.
And then
he has
also,
gone a
like,
lot.
the specific scene of each of the parents getting stunned, I thought was, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. You said it might just be the editing or just like the design of that sequence, but each time one of the parents got stunned, it's like they didn't do anything drastically over the top that like got them stunned or that the person directly next to them didn't get stunned. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to hark on it too much because that was just one scene of the whole episode, and there's a lot of the episode that I really quite liked, like the sequence where Jod almost gets spaced, where Brutus is trying to put him in the airlock and he's trying to save his skin. That scene could be it could be a lot worse than it is, I'll say. Like, we all know going into that scene the gist of what it's going to be like and how it's going to end, but I still thought it was a very entertaining and well done scene. Namely, the thing I was looking for whatever reason, rather arbitrarily, is that I didn't want them to really draw out like, oh, we're gonna hit the button now, or we're gonna hit the button, this is your last chance, this is your last chance. Like, no, Brutus was spamming, launch him, hit the button now, do it, do it, do it, do it. And so I appreciated that.
And reasonably so, because when given the chance, Jod did not waste a second to take Brutus out of the picture like he did. But I liked
Such
that
a good
sequence. I liked that sequence a lot. I said when we were watching it that I couldn't tell though if it really was AT-ATN or not. I was kind of on the edge of my seat along with the pirates because they were like, "This is a toxic maelstrom" or whatever it was. So I was like,
Luke and
it
I were
does
not.
look like that. I was like, I
I
don't know
thought
if
you were
this
a bit
is
silly.
well, no, because they went to AT-ATN, quote unquote AT-ATN already, and it turned out to be that other planet. So I thought, oh no, are they going to be at a different planet now, or is this the same place? I don't know. But then, like obviously,
Visually, we
Matt,
see.
yeah, you pointed out that it like kind of looks the same as it does from the planet when you're looking out. But I don't know. I was with the pirates on that one. I was a little concerned.
The one thing to backstep 1 second for in the intro sequence is I think I was distracted because and I loved it so much because visually it just it is just ET basically in the wood sequences and I love the way they did that, especially to see like what ET would look like now with like no stakes of actually having to remake ET. So I was really reveling in that aspect of it.
Yeah, if they are relying on the nostalgia from ET to sell that scene for the viewer more, it is falling on deaf ears for me because I haven't seen ET and did not love that scene, so maybe that is part of it. But that moves us right into the next sequence when they capture the Onyx Cinder, the kids claw game hook Brutus, and then Jod kills him, which was the first jaw-dropping moment of the episode.
Yeah, for like a couple of reasons too, though, because like
yeah.
it's like inadvertently the kid's fault because they trap him, like, which is like an aspect of it where like it's got to weigh on them a little bit to be like, oh Jesus, like I think the whole thing the show is trying to teach a little bit is like their actions have consequences, and that is definitely one of them. Like,
that's hilarious. I did not get that. I mean, pirates are gonna pirate, but that is so
I agree.
Funny. Yeah, but I thought it for a couple different reasons. Like, one, I can't believe that Jod would kill Brutus like that, and then the crew would just fall in line so immediately. Like, there was still, at that time, Brutus's entire crew directly behind him. I know they said in the moment before that Jod was saying that the crew loves me, so they kind of set that up a little bit, and I'm okay with that, given what we got. But then also, out-of-universe metagaming it, Brutus is really freaking cool, and I was hoping he would do something a little bit more.
That's how
like a Boba Fett action figure, like level cool.
That's how I felt too. I was disappointed when they killed him off because I wanted Brutus to be like the big bad guy of the season. Instead, he killed him, and it solidified that no, it is Jod. Like, everyone was right. Everyone said don't trust him. My heart didn't want to listen to everyone, just like the kids, but of course everyone was right. But yeah, I was very shocked when he died. I liked that sequence a lot too, and no, it didn't bother me how quickly that was over because they're pirates, and I mean that kind of stuff happens all the time. I mean, just as quickly as he killed Brutus and took over the rest of the crew, Brutus also overthrew Silvo at the opening sequence of the first episode. So, and like you said, they laid the ground with like, oh, the crew loves me, and they did a good job of that throughout the previous episodes too, where every now and then he kind of shares a glance with like one of the crew members, and we get this idea of like, oh, is this person going to stick up for him at the last second or something? And it happened once with that lady, I don't know her name, but the one who said that he had to get his right of last appeal or whatever it was when they hit that 6 space timer. But I like that. I was waiting for something to come down because they did a good job too of showing that claw mechanic thing before it had to be needed for plot purposes.
Yes. When else did we see that? I remember seeing it before, but I can't place exactly when or where or why.
I think it was episode 4. It was when they arrived to Lanupa. The quote-unquote royal dignitaries came down on that thing because
that's right.
Jod was introducing them, and you were expecting them to walk down the ramp, and then they came like descending on this crane, like in these
which is
robes,
like
basically.
Such a good, fun, playful way to introduce it, for then such a brutal twist.
Exactly. And that's what the show is doing well, is I feel like they're introducing these mechanics beforehand, some subtle, some not, and then coming back to them when they're needed, as opposed to just kind of introducing them in the moment whenever it's the plot dictates it, basically.
Just like the shell of the ship.
And I'll put a pin in that for a complaint that I have in a second.
Ooh, very interesting.
But with the Brutus killing, like you said, Matt, it's like the Boba Fett treatment where he's so cool and everyone loves him, and then he dies rather unceremoniously. Or Phasma, or Snoke, or Yord. And it's like, when are we just going to make our peace with that the coolest character is going to die, and that's not what the show's actually about.
I don't know if this is jumping ahead or not. I think this is kind of right in line, but something that I like, and Max, I know you mentioned that you were hoping that Silo was going to have his helmet on, but I felt like, as a Star Wars fan, right, like, you know that if basically someone has a helmet on, they are bad. And so I think that was a fun thing to be like, oh, he was bad when he started. I mean, like, Kylo Ren, Darth Vader, but it goes hand in hand. You can say Zoe Bliss or something, specifically in the movies, and I guess, like, ultimate lore, with especially with Stormtroopers, yada yada, Boba Fett, Jango Fett. But I think it's fun to be like, okay, especially in this, when it's playing on nostalgia a little bit, when it's playing in the 80s vibe, to be like, okay, when he has a helmet on, he's going to be bad, and so symbolically, we see him in the beginning, he's bad. He has no helmet on. You think he might be good, and then he finally solidifies him being bad, and he has it back on. I thought that was a nice little treat as well.
That is an interesting connection that I've never thought about before. But Luke,
Same, and I'm proud of
Luke, I see you.
myself.
The wheels turning in your head. You're trying to think of examples. I think that's right, though. I think if you wear a
I mean-
helmet, you're a bad guy.
Mandalorian is the biggest example I can think of. But broad strokes.
You mean the only example?
No, well,
I mean, there's a lot of clone troopers
I
and
know.
Zori Bliss. I am going to put a pin in that for later because I'm looking over at all my toys and all those characters right now. No Jedi ever wears a helmet. Why not?
no,
Helmets are
no
cool.
Jedi.
Because
But to
bad
defend,
guys equal. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say to defend the Mandalorian one though. The whole thing was he did wear a helmet, and he was kind of morally ambiguous. Obviously, he stuck up for Grogu, and that was kind of his turnaround. But then the whole thing was he started to take off his helmet, and at the end of season 2, he takes off his helmet to look on Grogu's face. Same thing with Darth Vader, right? When Darth Vader finally comes to the light at the end of episode 6, he takes off his helmet. I definitely think there's something there to hiding your helmet or to hiding your face behind a helmet, because
Yeah.
who else?
Is this
the,
what you guys just
armorer.
thinking about this right now?
Yes.
This is
This thought
blowing
has
my
never
mind.
occurred to me. Even the clones are bad guys.
Guys,
in the end.
I would like to say I am very rarely the smartest person in a conversation. I'm not saying I'm gonna stay on top. I'm just saying I'm gonna revel in this moment.
All right, we will be coming back to that at a later date. But moving along with, Silvo's helmet is back. Got that point down. The parent message, that was a good beat, but it felt a little. I didn't love how Fern's mom said, we're going to tell you in this message," instead of just getting out with the message. That felt like an odd piece of dialogue choice. And again, Neil's dad was there this time. He didn't talk, and he looked weird as hell. You guys didn't necessarily agree with me. I don't know. Maybe I was just expecting the Disney Pixar dad to just have slightly smaller eyes and a receding hairline and be the same design, and that's how you denote old man. But he looked
maybe a
distinctly
pair of
different.
glasses.
like Neil and his mom look very, very similar. Like what I was saying last week about the Ovisians, how a lot of the different species, characters in the same species, look the exact same. Neil and his mom look the exact same. Neil's dad looks different. So last week I was saying I appreciate that, so I will not completely renege and say that it's bad this time. That was another jaw-dropping moment for me. In an episode full of jaw-dropping moments, that one will definitely fly under the radar, because I
That's
feel like most
hilarious.
people didn't care.
Yeah,
But
definitely
I
not a
was
jaw-dropping
shook.
moment for anyone else. If anything, I thought he looked really cool. He had husks, which I don't know if we saw that yet or not, but I was like, oh yeah, no, he looks great. I think that's awesome.
I know. Part of me is like, are we introduced to him only in this episode because he's going to use them after, not to jump ahead, but after the lightsaber gets pulled on them? I was like, is he going to somehow be able to use his bruteness? Probably not. But I was like, why are we seeing him now for the first
Yeah.
time? You know?
The message itself was a complaint that I had, just because they've been talking about this message for a while, and I thought they were trying to message someone in the Republic to come help them. But apparently the message
Yeah.
was just to the kids, like, hey, we love you.
Yes, and it was just out of At-Atten, and they're hoping that gets to the kids. Like, the kids could be anywhere in the galaxy once they leave the barrier. And this
Mhm.
is just, they're launching it, like, into low orbit around the barrier, like, just into
Yeah,
space at that. I don't know. I didn't.
Yeah. I
That felt
definitely thought it was a call
underdeveloped
for
as an
help.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that kind of stuck out to me too. It was just not what
It
I
was a
thought
nice
it was going to be
moment.
at all.
In the show, like for the characters, but 1000% made no sense. Like it would, that's like low effort. That's like if you ask a kindergartner what they should do, like, oh, just contact them. Like, oh yeah, we should just contact them.
That's a good point, and actually, I think that's sort of pinpointing what my issue is with this episode, is that a lot of things feel like that. Like, a lot of things are good ideas. Like, I feel like the showrunner, whomever it is, the guy whose name I forget again that made the Spider-Man trilogy, I hope someone remembers it this time.
John
What's-
Watts.
John Watts. I feel like he
Chris
had like
Ford.
relatively detailed bullet points for what each episode would be, and then he handed it over to the writers and directors. And I feel like whoever wrote/directed this one did not develop those bullet points well enough. Like, they had
Lee Isaac
the
Chung.
parents have a chase scene through the woods, and they just like were very careful to have each parent have its own moment, but it wasn't that well done. And then this parent message was not very well thought out. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about is my biggest issue with the episode, that unclaimsies be close enough, according to Smee. And just 2 weeks ago, I was talking about how I didn't like how seemingly arbitrarily Fern laid claim to the Onyx Cinder, and then Smee followed in line, and then, but it's okay because it's kind of aimed at a younger age show, and I was okay with it then. But then last week, or 2 weeks ago, it came back, and Jod was able to usurp the commandership, or the captainship, and fight Fern to the death, and that felt like a great cohesive line through it. But now Unclaimsies is just good enough, and it's like, no, I thought you had convinced me that this was well thought out and planned, and now it doesn't seem to be again.
Yeah, so I too took issue with this. The whole "it's close enough" thing, I was like, that's a telltale sign of bad writing. Like, I feel like they could have done that better somehow in any other way. It doesn't bother me how loosely they claim the ship to begin with. It bothers me more so that the Pirates Code has come up multiple times now, but every time it has, it seemed to make sense to me. This one seemed
Yes.
much more arbitrary. So I know I said before that they were doing a good job of like laying the seeds of things that are going to come back later, but the idea that a pirate can only be captain of one ship, I feel like they could have like dropped a hint about that in a future episode. But because when it came up this time, it was just like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of convenient. And then it didn't really matter because Jod claimed it first. And again, the directing in this episode wasn't that great because Jod should have just said, I claim the ship or whatever. Instead, he let Wim kind of talk for a split second, and then he just like ran over to him and covered his mouth before he started speaking. And it's nitpicking, but it's definitely something that's like, like this could have just been done a little bit better.
Yes.
So that
And if
that
it was
whole
the only thing in the episode like that, I would excuse it. But I feel like every couple minutes I was feeling that way watching this episode.
I didn't even see who was the director of this episode. But the more
Lee Isaac
I'm talking about it
Chung.
out loud, I think it's the directing that I'm having
Lee,
problems
is anybody? You can hear me, correct? Lee Isaac Chung. I think Luke's googling. I just want to make sure. All right.
Yeah,
Lee
I was
Isaac
about to
Chung.
Google
What
it,
else
but
has he
I did
done,
not hear
Matt?
you
Do you
say
know
that
the
the
name?
first time.
Yeah, Minari and Twisters, the new Twisters. And then the Minari,
I hear that
which
was
is a
decent.
Stephen Ewan movie. And that's a thing I was gonna say something about is like I feel like a lot of his stories just happen to be about like families, and I feel like it makes a lot of sense that he would direct this episode. It is great to me. I did not mind those moments honestly at all, like especially with
Good.
them with the captain being a one ship. I thought that was a great twist that you don't want to see coming, because you don't want to be like, oh, I can figure this out. It's nice to be able to be like, oh, another rule has now been set in place. I think that's a kind of a fun aspect, especially again for like this Amblin style entertainment. I don't know, it's just like a fun little, especially when it comes to the pirates and stuff. Like, I think it's almost more fun to be in that mystery, because us as the audience aren't supposed to be the pirate experts, right? We're supposed to be the kids that are learning these pirate rules as we go along, versus something like the Claw. Like, that's Star Wars world, right? But like the pirate lore, I think, is almost more fun. With that being said, a big part of why we like Star Wars is understanding the lore. So it's kind of, I understand why
Right.
you're upset with it.
That's
Yeah,
fair. And
I push back only because I feel like they haven't been doing that up until now, and they were doing such a good job with it, such as with the Claw, because they kind of introduced that mechanic, but you don't expect that to come back. Like, the first time we saw that, we didn't talk about it at all, because we didn't think like, oh, that's obviously going to come into play later. And same thing with the clad in armor ship. Like, when Tak Ren had said that he has a ship clad in armor, like, it just kind of seemed like he was just talking about the ship. Like, no one gave that two thoughts until, for me, I saw that exact line in the Previously On. Then I was like, oh, is there
Yeah.
significance to that line? And then obviously later we saw the armor get ripped away from the hull of the ship and everything. So I feel like they're doing a good job of not making that obvious. Like, they can kind of like lay a seed for something and then come back to it later without it being like over the top, like, oh, just so you know, there's this also, other rule that isn't going to come into play now, but will definitely later. Like, it's
Yes.
there's a difference between how well they're
Naturally
doing
said
it
it.
now and like a much
Mhm.
more over the top example would be like any James Bond movie when they're doing the Q scene and he's giving him all the
Yes.
gadgets and you're just like, okay, every single one of these gadgets is going to come into play at some point. We just don't know when
And
or why.
yet, it's the best scene in the James Bond movie.
It
Besides when
is,
he
but we
uses
like
the
James Bond, but
gadgets.
for different reasons. But yes.
Yes, exactly. The heck?
I agree with you, Matthew, that I don't want to be able to like figure out the movie or the show. I want to be surprised, and sometimes that happens just because I forget things and I get wrapped up into the story and the intensity. Like last episode when I forgot that the Previously On skeleton crew talked about the hull demolition sequencer, and then I was shocked and amazed when they did it in the episode. I thought that the story was going to go like they can only be captain of one ship, and so Jod is captain of the Onyx Cinder, but now no one's captain of the big pirate ship, and so then the kids were going to usurp the captainship from that or something. And then it didn't go that way, which is fine. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I can move on. But then Jod, shortly after, kind of unceremoniously cuts off Smee's head, which did ruffle my feathers a bit more.
That was intense. I didn't see that. I was
Definitely did not see that coming.
didn't see.
I said it last week. He was my favorite part of the show. I'm getting that vibe. Like, not only is his head cut off, and I wouldn't be, and like in universe, it would make a fair amount of sense for him not to be in the show anymore. I don't see where his character would really come into play again from here, because now it's like Jod versus the kids going forward, which is good, but Smee would only muddy that water for clear storytelling, I think, from this point.
They're gonna keep bringing him back from the dead and making him the Marshal of At-Aten.
Like IG-11.
IG-12.
If he has a mini droid inside of his chest, I'm gonna shit myself, Max. Like Max and I were talking. Well, yeah, I don't need to go into it, but with the Acolyte plus skeleton crew. But I'm just waiting for one more thing to really set me up, set me over the edge.
Another part that I didn't love, which a lot of shows and movies do this, and it always bothers me depending on how egregious it is, but the thing where someone, like, you see someone not somewhere and then it cuts back and then they are there, and it's like, oh, didn't see that coming. It's like, well, I didn't see it coming because you established that they weren't there. We saw Jod get thrown out of the Onyx Cinder and then he was back on it. Again, it wouldn't be a deal breaker if that was the only issue I had in the show, but that's just another one of those things that came up every 2 or 3 minutes. And I was like, well, I don't know about that.
That didn't bother me at all, because he specifically looked back at the ship and the ramp was still down, right?
It was as the ship was ramping up. I mean, it's debatable. It could happen. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Didn't bother me.
Sensation.
That one didn't bother me at all. I thought that was totally good.
Good. I would hope to be the lone opinion on that one.
I think my complaints are pretty much done. Everything else I really liked. I liked him getting his head cut off. Smee. I like Smee getting his head cut off. Obviously, I like Smee. He's my favorite character. But I thought that was like a really good beat. You know, to me, that was what solidified Jod as like, okay, yeah, he's definitely a bad guy. And it was a surprise, obviously. So, no, I didn't have any issues with that. I didn't have any issues with him being on board. I liked that whole sequence a lot.
It's also crazy that we all forgot kind of about a lightsaber. Like, in my mind, I did. Like, I was like so stuffed up with what was going on. I was like, oh yeah, that is a part of the show that I haven't even thought about.
And that's like what I was saying before, that like I can get so wrapped up in the story that I forget things that are established, and then it acts like a surprise even though it shouldn't be. And like I also said a couple weeks ago, whenever Wim almost used the lightsaber, that it's such an overpowered weapon that was appropriately displayed in this episode, which is what I wanted that time. Like, Jod just needs to have this, like, I know they're kids, but I'm hoping to see it next week against the adults also. Lightsaber is an incredible weapon.
You're looking for a genocide, a small massacre.
The threat of genocide is definitely there from one man with a lightsaber.
Well, I mean, they set that up perfect, where he's just going to start murking droids left and right. Because they're all security protocol droids, so I feel like he's just going to go through them, like, instantly.
Yeah, the droids definitely,
I remember it came up with Jedi Fallen Order, the video game, that the powers that be, Lucasfilm, Disney, I don't know, are comfortable with lightsaber combat, dismembering and mutilating droids, even if they're humanoid droids, but you can't do that to humanoid organics. And so whenever I see, like in The Mandalorian Season 2, when Luke has a showdown with 15 super droids instead of 15 super people, it's like, oh, I see how we're cooking here. So yeah, I am getting the same vibe for that. And Smee also got his head cut off, but not if he was a person. I have big expectations for next week in that regard as well. We got to see At-Aten reacting to the arrival of the Onyx Cinder, which I have several notes about this because all of them were really cool. That courtyard, kind of, I wrote it in my notes as X-Manning and opening, like the basketball court in X-Men. That was cool. Loved seeing all those people just chilling on it. Like, no, you're in actual danger right now. You gotta go. And then when the Onyx Cinder landed, the gears seemed to lock in place,
Mhm.
which I thought was odd. I do think that happens in X-Men also, which I thought was odder because I'd already thought of it like X-Men. But I think in X-Men, correct me if I'm wrong or maybe I'm thinking of something else, it's because it lands on a basketball court that flips, like rotates on its axis, and so the ship is then suspended upside down when it's not in use. And is something like that going to happen with the Onyx Cinder? And that's why they
Ooh.
have to lock it into place? Is he going to try to escape and he can't lock? Like, we don't see ships lock into their landing position like this. Did that jump out to you guys?
No, but I like that now.
Yeah, I definitely caught it, and I think that was when I talked about the auto landing sequence and why wasn't it engaged when Tak Renid landed on the planet, because he crashed into a forest. So I'm wondering now if maybe he didn't crash land, maybe he was trying to escape and he crashed. I don't know. But that is kind of a lingering question that I have, because they also had that auto landing sequence initiated when they arrived at Akron.
Right.
It was confusing.
So yeah,
Because my initial theory was that the suit of armor around the Onyx Cinder is what got them into past the barrier and didn't force them into the landing sequence. But Max, you said that there was a landing sequence at Akron, so probably not. I hope that gets addressed in the next episode. There's a lot of things I hope get addressed in the next episode that I think will. This is more on my list of things that I hope get addressed in the next episode that I think might not. That really gripped me.
The
I
landing
would like
gear?
an answer to that. Yes.
I agree that might not be addressed, but I don't think that would be a problem.
Jod is now the Republic emissary, so we are still to believe that this is the old Republic, that is the current government that they are providing the credits for, that is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. He said Tak Renid was there hundreds of years ago, which is the first time we've gotten anything resembling a time frame, which I appreciated, however vague it might have been. But I like the way that sets it up, and then they go to the underground vault, which also, this one, again, I didn't hate it. It kind of scratched me in a funny way that I didn't love some of the CG, like when they were going underground, and then when he picked at the credits and they started spilling out. Some of that CG looked a little hokey to me. It wouldn't take me out of the show if I wasn't being almost taken out of the show every few minutes for this whole episode.
The CG going down, I agree. That was what to me looked over the top volumey.
I got to rewatch, I feel like, as well. The credits specifically didn't bother me as much. I feel like movement like that is so hard to do, maybe. Which is why it looks hokey a lot of the time when like elevators in general or like reveals or something.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not a particular critic to CG most of the time. Like, this could have very well been practical, and it's just a weird looking thing to see such shiny objects spilling over with that rate and velocity. I don't know. It just looked hokey to me.
There's a difference between, for me, having a problem with something and just noticing something, because I noticed that too about the credits, like the way it flowed. It looked like a little like more fluid than what it should have been. Like it didn't look right, and it didn't bother me, but I did notice that. Same thing with the volume, like when they were going down. That was definitely something that I noticed, but it didn't bother me. Like I wasn't like, oh, this looks terrible or anything like that. I was just like, they're definitely looking at a screen right now.
Yes, I love the way you just said that, and that's what I've been trying to say all night. Because normally, especially with Star Wars, I have such a forgiving eye about so many things, but specifically with this episode, just the fact that it kept happening so consistently, things that I kept noticing, that it started to bother me, and I don't know, it was just too many.
Regarding Jod as the Republic emissary, that is that raises a lot of questions that I also need answered, but I feel pretty confident that we're going to get that answered. Why do they think he's a Republic emissary? Did they know that Jod was coming? Do they actually think it's a Republic emissary? Who's the supervisor? Is he going to handle this situation? Presumably, we're going to see who it is. Is it Tak Renid? Is it going to be someone we know who... I don't even know who else it could be at this point. So, like, that whole thing raised a question. I'm also curious if... Because we know that the parents know that At-Aten is hidden, but they don't seem to know about the events that occurred in the galaxy. So when they refer to the Republic, we are led to believe that they're talking about the Old Republic. but Jod doesn't know that. So I wonder if he's going to have like some sort of slip of tongue where he says something about the New Republic, and the parents are
Yeah.
going to be like, "What the hell's the New Republic?" You know what I mean? But I don't know
Yeah.
if that is going to happen or not. It's kind of like
No,
that
I feel like-
joke that people say, like, "Oh, if you went back in time and you were like, oh, like, is this World War I or World War II?" It's like, what do you mean two?
Yeah. I wonder if there is something going on in the fact that like there again it seems like somebody is coming to collect credits or something, or like some sort of interaction. And so I feel like they are expecting somebody. In my mind, I know he's already dead, but I'm like, oh, it's gonna be Jimmy Smits. But like it just feels like but I feel like there might be something along those lines, almost like an experiment or something. Like they know, like they know what's going on, but I don't know. It just feels something just feels odd still. I know we it's kind of been it's unveiled. That's like, yes, they know what's going on. Here's what's going on, but I still feel like there's another layer to it where I don't know, somebody is using them or abusing them, but they were expecting somebody to come, and it just feels a little off still. And I don't know what it
Yes.
is.
It does feel off. Another thing that feels off was the supervisor making that announcement when the Onyx
Yes.
Cinder was landing, and that was like an announcement that the supervisor is a real living person or has the appearance of a real living person. Fern's mom seemed shocked that they would make an announcement like that.
Yeah.
So I do feel like we'll see more of the supervisor.
We will hear
I'm
more about the
excited to see-
lore of the supervisor. I think the
Yes.
citizens are led to believe that the supervisor is a person. I don't think that it is.
You think it's a Wizard of Oz kind of thing, man behind the
Yes.
curtain?
And I agree that there's something more going on here, like with these funds. Like maybe they are actually expecting somebody to come pick up money. I don't know how deep this conspiracy goes. Maybe there's some sort of connection to the Empire, and they're like helping bankroll what is now like the
that'd be
remnants, and that's how like
Crazy, actually.
they're able to do that.
I mean, that'd
stuff.
be
That could
really
be the
fun
tie-in to the rest of
actually-
like the Mando verse, basically.
That'd be awesome. The First Order is at this point in the timeline in desperate needs of god amounts of money, I believe, to make the Starkiller base. So that would be cool,
Yeah, it doesn't seem
Um,
like it would be free.
right?
And to make a
The
secret
last-
fleet on Exegol.
Ugh, and that, the
That's
last note
private
I
money. That's old
had,
money right there. That's old credits.
the last note I had, which I'm feeling better about it now than when I wrote this, because my initial gut reaction coming out of the episode was that it is weird that they are waiting so long for Jod to become a good guy. And you guys seem pretty convinced that he is just going to be a bad guy. And as you've talked
Yes.
about it, I've become convinced and hopeful that that is how it's going to end. So my last note was Jod threatening the families ? I'm gonna go ahead and change that to Jod threatening the families ! Because that's awesome. If they are going to commit that he is just a bad guy and that's the way the story is going to end, I'm all for it. I'm worried that it's going to be, I mean, I don't want to compare it to the Rise of Skywalker in a negative sense, because I do like I like a lot of the Rise of Skywalker, but I already did in the sense that like Brutus got killed and it's actually about Jod kind of being like Snoke and Kylo, and he's
Mhm.
committing to the dark side in so to speak, in Jod's case. But the Rise of Skywalker also ends with a rather rushed redemption arc for Kylo Ren, and I am worried that that's kind of what we're gonna see from Jod. If they stick with him being a true villain, I'm all for it. If he is going to be a bit of a soft-hearted guy at the end, then I think they went a little too he's a villain this episode to then double back next episode. But I will withhold my judgments until we see the finale for that.
So
guys
obviously,
remember-
Star Wars
Sorry.
loves doing the redemption arcs. It is very possible that they do it, and when they do it, it is required that there is a bigger bad above that character, which is why they had to hurry up and rush in Palpatine with the Rise of Skywalker. And obviously, that could still happen here with the supervisor, because we don't know anything about him or their motives or anything. If there is some sort of connection to the Empire and it's like some evil person, then I can see something where Jod has a last minute change of heart and he's like, oh my gosh, like, oh, this entire planet's being deceived, and then he, sacrifices himself to save the planet or something. I can see that. I agree when you kind of watch it as a whole that it might feel a little bit rushed, kind of like the Rise of Skywalker, in that sense. But I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see it as a whole once we can watch through all 8 episodes in one sitting. But regarding the cliffhanger of pulling out the lightsaber, it feels to me like a cheesy comic book ending where it's like, oh, to be continued next week, or whatever, because it's like, okay, like you said, for all those reasons, like dismembering like humanoid characters as opposed to droids, like we know Jod's not about to slaughter these families. Like something is going to step in and interfere, or it's not going to be what it looks like for some reason. So I was annoyed by the cliffhanger because it's like, don't tease me with something that I know for a fact isn't going to happen. Like if the next episode starts and we just see like all these dead bodies on the floor, yeah, I will be very shocked, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm like, don't tease me with it if that's not going to be the case.
I don't even think that was the tease necessarily. I agree that I don't think that's what's going to happen. I thought in the moment when I forget exactly who said what or the looks that were exchanged, but Fern was like looking at Jod, and I thought she was going to say, he's a Republic emissary, he helped us along the way, let's all thank him. And him pulling out the lightsaber is him committing to not being the Republic emissary for the next episode, and he's going to get into some shenanigans. I did not think that it was a threat to slaughter them immediately. I think he is at worst going to take them captive or something. But Matt, what were you about to say?
I think that's crazy. I feel like I think Star Wars has learned and they're doing something so different that I don't think he's going to have a change of heart. I know that all of those tropes are true, but I think that he is solidified bad. It is. Have you seen? Do you guys remember the movie, the late '80s, early '90s movie, Little Monster, Fred Savage, where he befriends?
I'm more of a Ben
monster
Savage
under...
kind of guy.
Ah, that's why.
I could count on one hand the number of movies I've seen from the late '80s and early '90s.
That's probably what is not one of them. And then he befriends the monster under his bed, and you think he's good the entire time, but he ends up being bad. I mean, it's this. It is. I think it is this trope of a movie where it's false trust into somebody, and I think it's again the way Jod, is like, gazzing over these credits. I think that is the most important thing in the world to him. He's also committed murder twice now. One droid, one human. Well, no, that's not. He's not a human. One alien, one droid. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think he is in my mind again solidified bad, and I think it's going to be the kids versus him, and that's the ultimate adventure, right? They've been in like chases. They've battled monsters. I think the biggest thing now is they have to defeat the foe, which is going to be Jod.
I agree with you in the way that the show is presented and all the evidence suggests that that's correct. But that's just the exact same position I was in after The Last Jedi. And with that situation, I had 2 years to stew and convince myself that Kylo is solidified bad. He's bad. He's going to be bad. And this time it's only a week. And so if it does go the other way, I won't be as disappointed. But I've just been burned before, and I'm hesitant to trust.
I get it. With that being said, I think that it is those 2 years, like you said, that is the problem.
2 years is a lot longer than 1 week, for sure.
Matt,
Hopefully
I hope that you're
Disney's
right. I
learned
do
from it.
hope that that's the case, because I do think that Star Wars needs to create more bad guys and just stick to their guns with this is a bad guy. So
Yes.
I do hope that's
And I hope
the
he
case.
doesn't die either.
You see, I wonder if he is or he's not, because I feel like he could be the connection to the rest of the Mandoverse. Like, I feel like he's going to be the one that'll pop up in another movie or something. Because it's like, I don't think Wim is just going to like pop up out of like nowhere.
No, yeah.
So it's like Jod makes the most sense for that. But in order to do that, like, how would he, like, he's probably going to survive. If he survives, he's probably going to be a good guy. So it's probably going to be a redemption. And again, the whole thing with the supervisor, like, I have a feeling that there's going to be a bigger threat above Jod. So, I mean, not that I have a problem with that. I just said that I hope you're right, Matt. But I think either way, they're in a good spot right now where they can do it one of two ways and it'll still be good. I don't feel like they've gone so far, kind of like you were saying, Luke, where you're going to be annoyed by the whiplash back and forth. I don't think it's going to bother me that much if they do that, so long as it's done well. But everything else up until now has been done well. I feel like this is the most we've complained about any episode so far, and even then, I still feel like we're kind of like nitpicking a little bit. And personally, I think it was some of the directing choices. I don't know who the director is of the last episode, but I'm very optimistic.
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Oh,
sorry,
Bryce Dallas?
the last episode.
Bryce Dallas
Sorry.
Howard was last episode.
Who's
Not
doing
the last
no,
episode, isn't
Who's doing the
episode
next
8.
one? Episode 8.
Yes,
yeah.
that was confusing. I think it is. Isn't it Ford and Watts?
Oh, is it? Okay.
I thought it was.
I thought it was.
Okay, good. So yeah, that gives me faith that they're gonna bring it all home. But I'm very excited for that.
Moving into final thoughts now / random beats that we haven't talked about. If you'd like to, the life monitor that had been addressed before on KB's mom's, that one of her moms, that started going off, so they knew KB was there. That was a great way for the parents to know that they're home. And it just got me thinking as a parent, boy, I'd like that. Just a little monitor to feel my child's heartbeat at all times.
I'm pretty sure that's
That's
complimentary
cool.
when your child's skull gets cut in half and replaced with a computer.
But moving into final thoughts for the episode, Max, do you have anything else you'd like to say that hasn't been addressed?
I really liked the sequence where they were going through that the barrier. I thought that looked really cool. I liked seeing those artificial storm maker things. I liked that the bottom of them were red, and it's consistent with what we saw in episodes 1 and 2, when we were pointing out that, like, oh, if you look at the stars, they look red, and something's up there, obviously. So I feel like it was good continuity. They did a really good job with that kind of. Overall, like, the entire show just seems very well thought out from the first episode to the last. So that's why I'm very optimistic for the last episode.
Yes, it's very exciting when I have a question answered so distinctly. And it's not like a big question that I was really curious about, but when Smee said, oh, that was Captain Rennett's genius, that he took one of the Mint's own ships so that he could come and go. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, ready to move on from that question now.
Yep. Yeah, that's another great example, because they threw it out there, right? And they were like, "Oh, the key is the ship." And I feel like any other show, maybe they would just leave it at that. But no, they did do a good job of explaining that. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Yes. Matt, final thoughts?
I loved it. I didn't have any complaints this week. Usually I feel like I complain about something, but I liked it. I don't know. I'm along for the ride. So I'm excited to see how it ends.
Nice. Well, that is all everything from us here today. Does anyone have any force for thought to leave us with?
I do have some force for thought. Today's force for
please
thought is
tell.
presented by the Bad Batch season 3, which we will review at some point. But there is a scene where Captain Rex runs into Commander Wolf. Commander? I think he's Commander. And Wolf says, "Oh, Rex, you're alive. I didn't know you were alive. There was a report that says that you died in a I forget the type of ship that he said, but basically you died in a ship." And it made me think about, like, how do they determine what happens after a crash? Like, clearly there's some sort of report, but do they not have any sort of black box? Like, I feel like there's got to be some sort of way to know what happened exactly. Presumably it has, like, some sort of video. Do they not know exactly what happened on the ship? Because I was like, they have to have that. And then I thought maybe Vader altered it to say that Rex and Ahsoka were dead for various reasons. One could be like, oh, like, it's like his last thing is Anakin, like, he doesn't want them to pursue them, so he says that they're dead. But I think a more realistic one is, like, he's Vader and he just wants to kill them, and this is just his way of being like, nope, they're dead, I'm not even going to think about them ever again.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome to Force for Thought Doesn't Understand the Aviation Industry, Part 15. But what is a black box?
It is a flight data recorder, and depending on the vehicle, it records different data. My understanding is
passengers?
some of them reports passengers. I don't think so. I think it just reports, but I mean, this is like our aviation world. I think it just reports, like, the data in the cockpit.
Okay,
but this is Star Wars, so surely they could have a little more information.
It was my understanding. I have not watched Bad Batch season 3 as recently as you, from the looks of it, but it was my understanding that that Ahsoka and Rex faked their death after the events of the Clone Wars season 7, when they buried all those clones and that Venator crashed and Darth Maul escaped. It was my understanding that Ahsoka and Rex faked their death there, and that's why Ahsoka left her lightsabers, and that's what happened.
And you think that was what the report said? The report just said we found their belongings, so they're presumed dead?
Yes.
So you don't think there was a black box that was altered?
No, especially not by Vader, because I don't love either of those theories. Mainly because Vader didn't know that Ahsoka was alive until that scene in Rebels, which we see. And
Did he
also,
though?
I don't like
That's a question. He could have had his presumptions the entire time and just never pursued it for either motive.
Are you trying to tie this in back subtly to the plane that got shut down in like Russia right now?
to the what? I'm sorry.
No,
you cut
was
out.
there a plane that just
The-
got shot down over
plane.
Russia?
I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I also don't know if it was Russia. I was hoping you guys would be more informed.
I'm assuming
than I
it's
am.
Russia. Who knows? Do they have black box
Potentially
data?
shut down. I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
Also,
People
what would happen
survive.
if they did have a black box if someone holdo maneuvered it? Do you think that's still recoverable?
Oh no,
No, I believe that vaporizes every part of the ship.
they're like
but maybe
it's
the Death Star
available, but it's
remnants.
only like a .m4 or something. You can't convert it to an MOV or MP4. It's like we could hear it, but we can't see it.
I mean, massive parts of the second Death Star were recoverable 30 years later, and so nothing's off the table in regards to ships being salvageable. But getting back to the Vader thing, I do not subscribe to that theory. I have thought before that in that sequence in Rebels when Vader uses the Force or Ahsoka uses the Force and feels Anakin and vice versa, and it cuts to Vader and he says the apprentice lives. I thought that was always kind of under emotional even for Vader. Like I get that you're Vader, you're not Anakin, and you have this whole, persona to upkeep, but dude, that's news. Like you can get excited.
But doesn't that lend credence then to my theory that he
does.
had his assumptions
Yes.
the whole time, or like a doubt in the back of his head? I mean, you see that emotional shot at the end of the Clone Wars, where he picks up the lightsaber and like he sees it and everything like that. And I think just because he's Vader, he was like, I hope they're dead. I'm going to say that they're dead. But ever since then, it was just kind of nagging at the back of his head. Like, I don't know for sure.
I think it's also Luke. Going back to what you just said about you don't think it's very Vader. I feel like the only other moment that's like that is when he knows Obi-Wan's alive, but is in A New Hope when he senses Obi-Wan for the first time in the same space station he's in. I think that's like a pretty big
and he's
moment
very
too.
chill there too.
He's very chill there, exactly. Yeah, I almost feel like it's like
A presence I have not felt since
Walk away.
yeah, exactly. So I feel like that's this akin to that as well. He just doesn't know how to deal with emotion.
Which is consistent with
very
what we know
well
about
be.
Anakin Skywalker.
Exactly.
This is a good example, and what I really want our Force for Thoughts to be more often than not of a fun headcanon that you can either subscribe to or not, because it's not going to be explicitly canon one way or the other. I choose not to subscribe to this. Max seems to. Matt, what's your final stance on it?
I also say nay.
What? But the choice is yours. No rights, no answers, right or wrong. Thanks for listening. Follow us on socials. Reach out to us about how much you liked or didn't like episode 7 of Skeleton Crew. For the record, I did like it overall. It was definitely my least favorite. I'm still positive on the show, positive on where we are, and heading forward. I don't want to be taken out of context that I disliked it. But
I'm gonna create a
us know-
compilation now. Why your complaints?
let us know what you think, and we'll see you next week.
See you, Sammy.